Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Christie, I'll note for the record that all board members are here and accounted for.
Sure.
Okay, Chief, any amendments to the agenda? Words and presentations, I believe there's an award you want to tell us about?
I do. So last week I was invited to represent the LFRA at the Chamber of Commerce annual awards celebration at the, I'm sorry, I can't recall the facility. Former counselors. Yes.
In Johnstown.
Candlelight Theater. Candlelight Theater.
Candlelight
Yes.
Theater.
So I was there with Sheriff Van, and we both were recognized on behalf of the respective organizations, the Sheriff's Department, Emergency Services, as well as LFRA. Both received the award for First Responder of the Year in relation to our joint response to the Alexander Mountain Fire. So it was a great gesture on their behalf. To Sheriff Van's credit, we got a standing ovation as well.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
so
that's
I
great.
shared that with you. And
Very
my,
great.
my thanks to the entire organization as well as the Sheriff's Department for without question, a collaborative effort that proved successful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well deserved, Chief, thank you. That will take us to public comment. Any members of the public like to speak? We got two guests here today from our finance department. Comments? Hearing none. Christie, anybody online?
No, sir.
Okay, that will take us to our consent agenda. There's two items on it. Is there anything anybody'd like to have pulled? If not, I'll take a motion to accept. There's minutes from two various meetings we've had. So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. All right, fairly light agenda today. First thing we have is a budget update. So I'll call on the chief to lead that conversation.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Chairman Swanee. I think we've had that discussion. I've shared the correspondence of concerns that I had with the board. So I don't think there's any additional conversation that's necessary unless you deem different.
Board, any comments or questions on budget?
I think, Brian, Mr. Chair, if you could come up to the table, he has some information to share.
Okay, Brian, please join us.
Okay, well, at our last meeting, I believe we had discussion about the city budget, vis-a-vis LFRA and the cuts. I know Chief Senelbach had done his kind of analysis of our budget workshop presentation from a screen. I hadn't seen it before that, so I wasn't really able to respond. So we've had time to look at it, like to have a brief discussion about it, so we can explain some of the items that were on there that were, that we can discuss. And then also just talk briefly about the city's budget situation as it stands now, where we are relative to 2E and our 2025, what we're calling the reduced services budget that council adopted. So it'd be kind of a general update as well. So those are the two things we'll talk about quickly. I'd brought Chief's presentation, if we could put it up on the screen.
I'm trying to get it.
Of course. Well, while we do that, we can maybe just switch the order. Talk a little bit about where the city is right now. As I'm sure you know, the city approved a budget for 2025 in October. We approved it, I forget the meeting, but the budget we put into place is what we call the reduced services budget, and it's the budget that meets our current revenue model, meaning the changes to our sales tax that occurred last year. So with that in place, obviously, we're awaiting, like everybody else is, next Tuesday to see what the result's gonna be. whatever the result is, whether it's an affirmative or a negative result for question 2E, we're gonna have a lot of things to consider going forward. If we have the affirmative result, we have the list of cuts that have been made. I would think council would want to start there with restoring them, of course, this is all subject to another conversation, but that is what we were anticipating. There would also be hopefully a little funding for capital, because this whole conversation has been operational. So the city has been using CIP to kind of buy time to get to this ballot question, so there'll also have to be discussions around capital, and which programs we're gonna restore, which projects we'll restore first. And then there's a whole list of additional capital that's been piling up, that has been obviously, you know, very outside the conversation and outside the city's ability to fund. So with all of that in mind, we are on what we're calling a hiatus or a pause in terms of making any big decisions around revenues or programs until we know A, what's gonna happen next Tuesday, and then B, have those conversations with council about how we wanna restore it. And then, you know, obviously the third piece of it is, as you know, city manager Jim Thompson comes on board to see what directions we'll receive there, so that's where we are. We're trying, but I feel what our plan has done is that it has winnowed down the uncertainty as much as we can. Understanding, obviously, since we're waiting on an election result, there's still a lot of uncertainty, so we feel like it's been a long journey. But we feel like we got to the best spot we can be right here, to be able to respond as quickly as possible to next Tuesday, so that's where the city is right now, and sometimes I know when it's a little frustrating, let's move conversations forward, either this one or about a dozen other conversations we're having. It is a little bit of a pause while we wait the results.
Next Tuesday, that, it doesn't really set in until you hear next Tuesday.
Heck of a night.
Brian, just a quick question. So if things move correctly, let me rephrase that. Things move in a direction where there's more funding next Tuesday for the city, is not to put words in your mouth, but would it be appropriate to say that you look at a supplemental budget to enhance some of the expenditures for the city if that were to pass?
Yeah, I can say with pretty high degree of confidence, yes, we would certainly be doing appropriations to appropriate that additional revenue. And I think, those appropriations, we would just start with the list of reductions, right? We would start with the operational cuts and then see, is it the will of council to restore them as they were, or to put more into particular categories, right? You can see right away the conversation becomes more complicated than flipping a switch, but I'm fairly confident council would want to increase spending in certain areas.
Was
Okay.
it the PowerPoint that you have on here?
Yeah, it's
It's called executive session, so I didn't want to open it unless that was.
right.
Yeah,
You can open it. Let's see. It's not the Black Ops one, is it?
No, blue light.
Right?
Alright.
It should just be the workshop.
I have to share my screen. That one?
No, I'm so sorry, I don't know. It was the presentation, it was the workshop slides that Chief Sendelbach had
I can prove it.
put the text boxes over. I give you the right. I only have one.
So there's only one PowerPoint in here.
I think you grabbed the wrong drive.
That is just on I have it in my email too. Do you have it, Chief?
Yeah.
Alright, fire to the rest.
How's Ruth? How's Ruth doing? Yes,
There
there you go. Staying busy, we're gonna change the weather.
It was a PDF, so.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. but
Get
look,
the
this
house
is a
all
quiet-
ready.
Not familiar with what she's doing there.
No,
She was elected president there this year.
oh,
so
no, I didn't.
It's very time consuming. Passing ships in the night.
Okay, well, good for her, though, taking it on.
Yes,
Alright, sorry about that. Okay,
I started saying join.
so again, this is just what went up on screen last meeting, when we met in September. I had time to look it over now, just wanna kind of go through things quickly, I haven't done like any in-depth research, and you'll see in a minute, what we're talking about there. So if we could do just next slide, please. Okay, so this, on this first slide, and again, for the format, what this is this was our work, the budget workshop, and Tim kind of put dialogue boxes over it for comments. So this first comment, I understand it, I certainly respect it. It's those things in finance and accounting when there are two correct answers, in my opinion. Here you've got, what are the FTEs for LFRA 134? I understand Chief's point, the 0.8 is really the effective FTEs as far as the general fund's concerned, right? That's what the city general fund is paying. But I think there's a logic to showing how many people are in the LFRA, so. I know Chief had brought this up with me a couple times, but maybe we just agree to disagree in terms of the format.
So
The second note, let me finish. The second note is about the 15 positions fully funded by the rural. And that they shouldn't be reflected in there because the rural has agreed to pay for them. My concern about that is that the rural has agreed to pay for them for only a period of 3 years. After 3 years, I assume they'll still be here and they'll be more expensive. As we all know, personnel costs be the main driver of that. Roughly 1.5 million, I think, is the budget amount right now. And then in 3 years, that'll be over 2. I shouldn't throw out numbers. In 3 years, it'll be substantially more than the 1.5. That is something our council needs to be acutely aware of. Because that affects obviously our future in terms of our funding model. But also when we do have the district conversations and we talk about what is the adequate mill levy required to run a district. That number is included in there. Those firefighters, and I do believe there are some, I say unsworn, but that's not the right word, there are some admin types in there as well. Those are,
I interrupt for a second. Are there admins in that 15? Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure I didn't.
of course, those are in the calculus when we talk about the district. So when we talk about the district and we say, hey, here's the need for, what we'll call, for the fire department, for the district. Those positions are included in there. So it needs to be reflected. We need to be talking about these 15 because it's a big deal. It impacts us now, because when we talk about how much money does LFRA need to convert or to continue operations, well, they're included. So to omit them would not be giving my board all the information. So those, that's why those are included there. I understand Chief's thing where it's like, hey, they're not being paid for right now. But they do reflect, they do impact the district conversation, and for the city, that is a humongous thing to be thinking about in 3 years, which as we all know goes by.
Brian, I need to make a comment on that if I could, and correct me if I'm wrong anywhere here. But these decisions weren't made by the rural to hire these people for 3 years. We have a strategic plan, and that strategic plan called for hiring those people. And the authority, again, comprised of the city manager and 2 people from the city council, all voted to hire these people, understanding full term, long term, the city would be on the hook for paying their 80% when the time came. So it's not like the rural just said, let's hire 15 people for the next 3 years and then let them go away. Everybody's always had a conversation, been very concerned about hiring people and keeping people. So I just want to make that point. This didn't happen in a vacuum.
Absolutely.
It happened with the full support of city.
To that point, Jeff, when that conversation was occurring about the 15 FTEs, the 3 years wasn't a random selection as well. The 3 years was specifically selected because that was the amount of time that was believed we would need to merge the city and the rural together. And so the city, in fact, never would pay for those positions because when the 3 years concluded and they were merged, the positions would continue to be funded, as would all positions, by the rural. So we are now.
By a district.
Right, by the rural district,
Right.
which would now be
Which would be
the everybody district. And that's where the 3 years came from and the reason that the rural agreed to pay for it in the interim. I think we're beyond the point now where the 3 years is realistic, because we haven't actually started. And so I think one of our 3 years has passed and we are now looking at a further 3 years. So we, city probably is looking at being on the hook for at least 1 year, assuming a merger occurs. If a merger does not occur, then we're gonna have to figure out what happens with those positions.
Thank you, Emily. Chief, you have a
So-
point to make.
I guess the whole point of this is, I need to lay some groundwork here. This is the body that I report to. And the whole reason this email was sent exclusively to you and the representatives that were in the room that day. This was never projected as a PowerPoint, never shared publicly. It was sent to this body as an update of my concerns. Now, this is where I have concerns and I continue to have concerns. For the last 3 years, I have tried to provide clarity as to the representation of the LFRA, including multiple conversations with Brian, including a conversation prior to this presentation at the workshop with acting city manager. This does not represent the LFRA. I agree 100% with you, Brian. If you're gonna project this, we project it together and we explain it, both sides. When you put this up there, it becomes a public document. It represents that we brought on 15, in your slide presentation, 13 personnel. Well, when the general public sees that, they make the assumption that LFRA has got 13 personnel additional. Okay, when you're doing budget cuts, that was the projection that was out there. That is not accurate. And this slide clearly depicts that these are coming from the general fund. They are not. Now, you did put an asterisk down at the bottom at my request. That is not an accurate depiction of what this slide says. You are not paying 80% of those additional employees. You're paying 0. Now, the way that agreement was written was 3 years or transition to a district, whichever occurred first. Now, we can forecast out that the district doesn't occur in 3 years. We cannot, and I won't stand for anybody making an assumption that those are gonna be the liability of the city. That is a conversation that this board needs to make, and not the CFO and not the city manager in isolation. We collectively will make that decision and we will share that with city council. And I would be happy to share that at the workshop, or would have been happy to share that at the workshop. I think that's fair and appropriate and, more importantly, transparent as to what the situation is. That's my heartache. I have tried multiple times. Brian, very early when you and I first met, you know I had heartache. And I can go back, I know Chloe's online too. I can go back today and pull Chloe's email and that slide that I said, Brian, I'm okay with you projecting. These were my exact words. I'm okay with you projecting this, but we need to have context as to what has occurred within the LFRA. Do you recall that conversation? No, I'm
I'm
not.
not here to like play interrogation with you.
No, I'm not
Talk about it,
interrogating.
because Tim, here's the deal. You and I did talk about these presentations. I know you're not happy with it. Since the very first time we had a budget retreat, you came up to me after, you were not pleased, as I recall. I get it. You don't prefer this methodology of presenting.
No, I'm fine.
Let me finish. I am the chief financial officer for the city.
And I'm the
I
fire
just-
chief. And I'm the fire chief.
All right, let's let Brian finish.
Thank you, sir. As the chief financial officer for the city, I work with the CMO to determine what I'm gonna present to my board, so they get a wholesome picture of what they're facing. Those FTEs are going to figure in our future. I understand how it's like, hey, listen, they're not impacting you right now, but they are impacting the district conversations, because the cost of the district is what we'll call, base number plus this additional amount for these FTE. So my board needs to be aware of how many people are here, that they were added, and it's gonna have it's having a consequence right now in terms of the district discussions, because it elevates the expense number. Or in the future, where we've got this situation where really we don't know what's gonna happen. And forgive me, I wanted to address your comments, Chairman. When you had said, hey, this board made that decision, absolutely, it was unanimous. I get it. I was here, I remember it. I'm not in any way saying that the city wasn't aware or didn't participate, it was a unanimous decision. That's not at all what I'm saying. I need to inform my board of what's there. And I understand your point, Tim, when you say, hey, I said this is the way I wanted it. I said that's the way I want that slide. It's up to me. I'm the one who goes up there and speaks to this board. And I'm the one in 2 years or 3 years who's gonna have to explain what happened with these FTEs. So it is my decision how this presentation is going to be. So I respect your point,
Well, it's
but
representation of the LFRA.
Everybody go through the chairperson, if you would, please.
Jeff, may I address something? Because I'm troubled by
Let,
something.
let me ask Brian if he's finished.
thank you, I am.
Okay, go ahead, Emma.
I'm gonna address Brian directly. Brian, you are the CFO of the city. And you are absolutely entitled to present any information you want to the city council, to whom you report. You can prepare any presentations you want to the city council, and you can present them with any concerns you might have regarding the financial information or the goings on of the authority. That is your board, and you are their employee. You're not an employee of the authority, and this isn't your board. So just the same as you have the right to address city council with any information, discrepancies, concerns that you feel is pertinent, Fire Chief Sendelbach has the right to present this board with those same concepts. He doesn't agree with your presentation, that's clear. You don't agree with his presentation, that's clear. But he has the right to present this board with his concerns just the same as you have the right to present city council. And I don't think that's back and forth who's right and who's wrong and who's gonna get one up in front of the authority board is productive any longer. And it would be my recommendation that we stop. The city council has heard what the city council is going to hear. The authority board has heard what the authority board is going to hear. And as the elected officials and final decision makers, they will all make their decisions.
Chief, did you have a comment? Yeah, the back and forth doesn't help. I agree. It puts us at odds with each other, but it is very concerning at the same time. I think it's gonna be beneficial to have the election behind us. I think it's gonna be beneficial to have the new city manager here and a fresh set of eyes on this, not taking anything away from Rod or staff or anything else. I mean, hopefully we can start with a clean slate on this and everybody feel good about it. I think part of the confusion here, and I think it's even in, I know it's in our minutes. Rod, you had asked Brian and the chief to get together prior to this meeting and have a conversation and send an email out to the board. And I was hoping to see something in writing so that we all understood it and knew where the chief and Brian were at together on this. Why we haven't gotten that email, I don't know. Brian, thank you for your presentation, but I don't know what good it does us at this point. Go ahead, Brian, sure.
Thank you, sir. First, I did have a meeting with Amy Gallagher to start to discuss, these things put together. And then I believe
She was, right?
she resigned.
Okay,
So I did have one meeting to move towards that. And I should have started by explaining why we didn't, get to that email or get to that kind of conversation with
was the
LFRA.
chief present?
No.
Okay,
So I did have the one meeting with her, she resigned, so then I did not meet with her subsequently. I feel it's important to address these slides. I know that in an email Chief sent me, he said that he did present this presentation to other boards. And also including your staff, right?
Absolutely not. I
Okay,
shared
I
it, I
misunderstood.
shared
Shared it.
this presentation in the email that the acting city manager received as a member of the board. I included the representatives that were in the room that day,
Right.
which is representation from the Fire Rescue Advisory Commission, city legal, LFRA legal, as well as rural.
So that's my concern. And that's why I feel like addressing it, it was put on the screen last meeting, right? And I hadn't seen it.
It was not put on the screen, Brian.
In September, at the September meeting,
You're not in the court,
At
it's
the
illegal.
at the LFRA meeting.
No,
maybe it's a rural meeting.
no, it was
Not
not.
the rural meeting.
It wasn't presented. I sat here with the slides in front of me. It was never presented.
To this board, it was.
We have a video, we can go back and check it, but let's move on.
Okay, well, regardless.
Brian, the chief
So,
is permitted
Go
to
ahead,
present
Rod,
things
I'm
to
giving the floor to Rod.
I do remember, me asking that, and I do remember having, everybody trying to get together, started down that path, we didn't get there yet. You know, certainly trying to get information back to everyone in a timely manner. But I think that the best thing to do now is maybe take a step back. And we'll just stop the presentation right now, and then we can pivot and provide that in writing. I know that a larger conversation here, but we can pivot. Go back and try that other approach again. But this conversation in a week may be moot.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it may be moot, if you will, and we'll have a different conversation. But I will say this, this is hard. Nobody wants to be in the place we are when it comes to funding, uncertainty, all those kinds of things. Nobody wants to be there. But this is where we're at right now. Maybe we'll have a different trajectory in a week. But we'll still have to continue to work through the issues and to move forward, Mr. Chair. So perhaps we could just pause for now and work.
I'm okay pausing, and Brian, we appreciate the difficult position you're put in. Please understand, this is not how it has worked in the past. I mean, we may have had the city CFO in 3 or 4 meetings over the course of the last 15 years. This hasn't been an ongoing thing. Generally, the spokesperson for the city representing the city has been the fire chief. The fire chief is the person that reports to the board. He comes in here and says, here's what's happening with the city. When we've had the CFO or maybe Matt come in here, it's explained something that the chief needed help explain. But what we have now is 2 different variations. I'm not a financial expert, and remembering from one meeting to the next is difficult at best, especially when we're dealing with stuff we don't deal with in and day out. But we are getting mixed messages as a board, very mixed messages. And what we thought we heard one time is not what we're hearing the second time. So we need the chief to be our go-to person, and we need the city working with the chief so that he understands it and he can explain to this board so that we understand it. And I'll open it up to other board members.
I guess I have a question. Is there a question about whether the 13 or 15 personnel were needed? Is that an issue in all of this discussion? Okay, thank you. Okay.
Chief,
So I'll say that, and I appreciate everybody's comments, and I appreciate Brian's comments and Matt being here and Chloe being online. I think this is a difficult situation. We talk about this every single month. The governance model that we have puts me in a position that I'm talking to city councilors, talking to the city manager in a different capacity. The point is this is my forum to convey a message to him. And I'll commit to Brian, I'll commit to Matt, and I'll commit to Chloe, the entire finance team to work on this together. What I want is just adequate representation of the LFRA. And Director Wensing, I'll say this, and I'm saying this respectfully, this isn't hard. This isn't hard. This is leadership. This is what we get paid to do, is make hard decisions. And I'm more than happy to make the hard decisions when the crunch time is there. And I'll do it collaboratively with you. And I think that's what we got to do, is we got to bridge this gap. We don't need to be adversaries. We're on the same team. This city flourishes when we work together. It does not flourish when we're at odds. And I'll be the one that I'll take the banner and say, you know what, I'll apologize to you. I want to bridge this because we got a long road ahead of us. We got to make some hard decisions, but that's leadership. And I'm willing to do that. So all I want is LFRA and the members of this organization to be adequately represented. And that's my duty. So.
If I might just. The one thing I guess, and maybe I misunderstand this sometimes, Brian, but we as a body agreed that we would accept the fact that the rule put the money forward to have these positions funded. That was agreed on by the authority board. Why is this an issue? I guess that's what boggles my mind.
It's not, if I'm,
You'll go right ahead. That's a question.
it's not an issue at all. I think this is being misinterpreted. I'm just talking about presenting it.
Okay,
right, and-
let's clarify what do you mean by presenting.
If we can go back to the presentation,
Well, I remember what was on the.
looking
board.
at the FTE numbers
Okay.
on the slide.
Okay,
The whole conversation was about including the extra positions that are funded by rural in the FTE count in the workshop slide. That's all I was talking about. I have never said one word about the legitimacy or the origins or.
no, and I didn't mean to.
So,
imply
yeah,
that you
but I think
did.
that came up. I think the conversation seemed to drift. I believe Emily was talking about a little bit, which is, hey, it's not your place to talk about the thing. All I'm talking about is what was in the slide. And I didn't want it to be a quid pro quo or an argument going back and forth, but unfortunately, a lot of the information that was in that slide that did go outside this room in that presentation isn't true. It goes on to talk about increases to PD and how the PD went up a bunch and the city's misrepresenting it. I don't like that.
Okay,
I
if
need
if
to
I might interrupt
comment.
just for a second, right, here's my point of my question is. We agreed to these employees, right? This is a long-term thing. We weren't hiring them for 3 years and then, poof, they go away. That's not gonna happen, right? The fact of the matter is, the 3 years Emily brought it up, and Chief, you mentioned it. That was our deadline to make sure that we could move to the district, not to make sure, but at some point, we gotta move on and get things done. That was the reason the 3-year was presented, right? So I guess if they're employees, they're employees. I just don't, it seems like we're going around in circles on this and I don't know why.
I agree with what you're saying, Commissioner, it's again, we were just talking about the difference of opinion that Tim and I had about, hey, you shouldn't put those FTE in the FTE count for LFRA as it relates to the general fund, and I said, I feel like I should have them in. That's all this was about.
No, I get that, but the reality is, what it is what it is, how we voted on it is how we voted on it, so let's move down the road, and I mean.
Sure, and I did, and I included them in my FTE count, and then this presentation comes out saying, hey, that's wrong. And I feel like I need to say no, that's correct, because the credibility of the city gets attacked every minute, it feels like, okay, no matter what I do. Okay, and that's part of the job, I get it, it's part of the job, believe it or not, why I love it. And this was another example of, hey, look at the city's work, it's off over here, and it's off over there, and it's wrong there, and I need to defend it, actively defend it, and do a better job of proactively communicating at the outset. Which is what we've been doing around the budget, and I think we've made great inroads with the community. And that's why sometimes when I see things like this, I go, hey, I have to correct that. And this conversation has gone far afield from what I was talking about, which is, hey, here's why I put 135 on there, and here's why Chief wanted 121, or whatever the numbers were, right? That's all I was talking about. I was not talking about, hey, this was a bad idea or it was improperly done. And that's where the conversation went right away, right? It was like, hey, this was duly approved. I wasn't talking about any of it. I was just saying, I need to tell my board, here's how many firefighters there are, here's how many FTE there are at the LFRA. Beginning, middle, and end of story, and it does, kind of like I said at the very beginning, the problem is, in finance, there can be two correct answers. Right, oh no, you said general fund, so you should only put, how much you're contributing, 80% of it, or don't include what the rural's paying for. I understand it, but I disagree, and made the decision to put that in there, so,
Alright,
and that's why I wanted to go through that presentation, because again, it goes on to say things like, oh, the police actually got a $6 million increase. Now that slide's out there, it's in the wind. So that slide comes out, goes to the paper or who knows where. I'm gonna have to debunk that whole thing citywide. That's why I wanted to start with this board and say, I want to address the differences of understanding in these slides for this board. And then hopefully it never boomerangs on me and someone says, hey, the police got these huge increases. Because that's.
Brian, let me
Yeah.
ask you a question on this, because I think this is part of the confusion, at least for Paul and I and the rural. And I don't say this to be argumentative, I just want to understand it. When we start having conversations about these cuts first of the year, where we were at ballpark figure was a 3% cut for the police department, about a 10% cut for the fire authority. And we compromised, went back and forth. Now we're at about a $750,000 cut on the authority. But now, as I understand it, and other people understand it, the city's not taking, or the police are not taking a 3% cut, they're actually getting an increase. Am I wrong on that?
Yes.
Okay, that's That's part of what we don't understand. And that's part of, I guess, what we were hoping when you and Chief and Finance were gonna work this out, put this in some type of written form where we can understand it, so it doesn't look like we're being told what we hear, different stories.
Understood. I will commit to putting, what I'll do is. I won't put text box on top of chief text boxes on top of my work. I'll write a memo. And get, and I should have done that beforehand, so I apologize. I thought we would have the conversation, but, and to your point, Chair. You had just said, hey, we heard that PD got this big increase. Well, you got it from, it's the next slide. That's what I wanted to address next, is yes, there was an increase to PD, but none of it was discretionary, and I wanted a chance to explain that to this group. But very quickly, as things tend to do at the LFRA board.
Let me stop you there. Maybe that's part of the confusion. You say discretionary.
Can we look at it? Can we look at it?
Yeah, but I mean, are we being uniform across the board? Discretionary, not discretionary, both rural or not rural, fire authority and the police, have we been consistent all along in our verbiage?
Well, and I just want to throw out there that this reduction exercise was not equitable across the board, first and foremost. So that needs to be thrown out there as a caveat. This is not a 10% across the board like it was for COVID. These were strategic implemented cuts.
Well,
It's confusing for me to hear, and I don't have a dog in the police department, right? But it's confusing for me to hear the police did not get any increase, and then to hear the police got an increase, but it wasn't discretionary. So it seems like maybe the terminology is not being uniform. So it sounds like, yes, the police did in fact get an increase. The increase was not discretionary, and this board doesn't understand why that matters, right? Because at the end of the day, the answer that they're hearing is yes, the police got an increase. So I think there's mixed messages even within the message.
we need
right?
consistent vocabulary and presentations throughout the year. When you guys change gears, it may make perfectly good sense to you. It doesn't to us. We don't deal with this stuff day in and day out.
Okay, I appreciate that.
If I could, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I want to reemphasize that, I don't think we want to do back and forth. And I really. So, as I suggested before, perhaps the approach here is to really go ahead and put something in writing, as Brian said, to the board. And to clarify it, that way. So I'll make that suggestion again. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't say this is going back and forth at this point. I hope you don't. That's not the intent. I think we're getting at a point where we're understanding what each other's looking for in verbiage, because there's been a change in vocabulary and how we report and don't report things. We're looking for consistency.
Yeah, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to put the slide on there. to show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a few more, please.
Tell me when.
Sorry, I'll just keep going, please, and I'll just say, hey. Please. So right here, I'm sorry, I promised you I'd say something. So, this is kind of where it starts, is City of Loveland, is facing the shortfall. LPD, okay, LPD gets an increase, true.
Well, what's the date on this? Is this the most recent?
This is from the budget workshop, so this is what's in the budget.
Because I read in the paper this morning, it's 9.5 million. Is 13.2 correct or 9.5? I mean, we get different messages all the time.
Right, the number is 10.5. That is the projection, that's the only number finance has been putting out for the last few months. But unfortunately, people say numbers.
These are savings from last year, just throwing that out there.
I'm sorry,
Savings from
Last year?
2023.
Oh, you're right. So this was the slide illustrating the budget vacancies. I think it's the next slide, Christie, I'm sorry. So on this slide, okay, so this is where we talk about our exercise at the city to create the current services, or I should say the reduced services budget. What we did with council was first, we took our 2024 budget and we created what we call our current service, or I should say reduced services budget. In order to do that, for example, we are not cutting personnel, we're not cutting compensation as one of the measures in the reductions. So compensation will go up, even though we have a reduced services budget, I still have to account for our current compensation. So right away, you can see how it becomes confusing. Oh, you're reducing budget, right? But before I reduce, I have to increase. And that right there could be a lot of the confusion. And I think that's what generated the confusion around PD. When we said, this is a reduced services budget, but it's more than the 2024 budget. Because this is our new permanent model. And we're not gonna, forego merit increases or training or things like that. So you have to acknowledge those, then reduce from there. That's what happened with PD. PD had a step increase plan, and we had an adjustment to their retirement contributions that we couldn't step away from. Those were compensation related. And that totaled a lot of money. In the public safety sector, as we all know, those step plans can hit pretty heavy, when they do. So PD did go up the roughly 6 million, but then had to cut $1 million from there. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but when I say, hey, that wasn't a discretionary increase and it wasn't a program increase. It wasn't them saying we need more of this or that, it was just saying baseline increases, which in their case is what was big, because they have very big payroll, and we had these adjustments to make. That's why it went up. Then they gave back $1 million, not from those areas, but from their other program areas. So I guess to your point, Mr. Chair, you can see how it does get confusing. When Chief says, hey, cops went up 6 million, I want some of that. And I go, no, they didn't, right? They reduced, they gave back $1 million. Both are true. So that is how we get into these situations. And for the purposes of this conversation, where it's, we want this parity thing between the two services, and now I'm dealing with, hey, you should be giving 6 million to LFRA. You can see how quickly it becomes, difficult. And again, I will take accountability for not having this in writing to you beforehand. I will take care of that before next meeting. But I think it is important to get on the same, or to at least explain our positions. I know that can end up sometimes being contentious or sounding like I'm trying to counter everything or go back and forth, but really it's so important that these things are clear, because if it gets out there, this slide gets out there somehow. I'm concerned it's been emailed, now subject to court and all these things. Someone sees this and goes, well, it looks like city work. Oof, off I go. So that's why I want to clarify, but of course, like we've talked about, I think we're strong enough to say, Chief and I disagree on some things, and how to present them. So it's difficult at times, but I don't think, I don't think it's a roadblock. It's a set.
Chief, so a couple of things, and I get your concern. This is the difficulty of this board, is anything I send to the mayor becomes public, which is part of my board. It's already public. The Reporter Herald reported, not these slides.
Right, not this.
Reported an increase of PD of 6 million. It wasn't me. It was out there before I said a word about that. And we're getting hung up. And I actually acknowledged the email that you sent with the clarity of the 2 PD references. And I acknowledged that and expressed my appreciation. And I did that to the entire body that you sent it to, which was far more reaching than the email that I sent. To that point, I asked for the clarity of representation with the LFRA. That's what I'm more concerned about. It's not to debate the discretionary that was applied to PD and the discretionary that was paid to LFRA. It's a different discussion. That train left the station. My concern is that we're harping on 134. There are a number of inaccuracies in here that are concerning to me, that create a wrongful reflection to uninformed counselors of the LFRA. That's my thing, and this is the body that I have to present that to for clarity. That's really the backdrop of this whole process.
Let me ask the question of the mayor and John, if I can, Rod, for that matter. I mean, you're the city representatives, you hear this stuff. How do we get these messages back to city council so they understand it? I mean, are these conversations that you have at some point with other counselors so that they understand? I mean, from a rural perspective, we totally depend on this board to keep the city informed, just like Paul and I and the chief keep the rural informed. And it seems to me they should know this stuff.
I've heard no questions from the other council
Yeah.
regarding the budget in
We
general.
did the budget workshop, we have had so many budget meetings this year.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, sure, Brian.
that's the slide from the workshop right
Yeah.
there. That's it. That's what we talked about. We talked about this
Yeah,
exact process. I explained
We
it
do
to
know
them.
about the step plan.
They got it.
Yeah.
We talked about the PD and why it went up and they understood all that. That is the workshop slide. So you're looking actually at the conversation we had at the workshop. Chief was there.
So that's my whole point. I'm not claiming these to be my slides. These are your slides. And my points that I was gonna present to my board of concerns were all of these slides, not the 134 in isolation. There are a number of other references of concern here. And I've acknowledged your representation of LPD. And I did it to the entire cast of characters that you had on your email. I did that in acknowledgement and in appreciation. But what we didn't address is LFRA.
Okay, and I guess for me, I know that the word inaccuracies is in this presentation. And that's where I feel like I have to go through this, explain it to this group, because I feel like this is where it started. I'll do it in writing. And that was my hope for today, was to go through it, but I get to see that, maybe we should do another time. But it's extremely important that we go through this and correct any notions that there were inaccuracies. These are disagreements. I hope this is becoming clear to the board.
Well, let me go around and ask board members, starting with John. Where would you like to go from this point forward?
What I'm hearing is that there's a presentation difference. Both seem to be correct, but the reader might interpret something different. So if we can clear that up, maybe throw another presentation together, but with an email explaining basically what you just went through. I think that'd go a long way. Speaking for the city council, I don't see it as a problem, maybe because I just focus on this stuff. And what the chief releases, I may go through real quick, but this stuff I gotta live with. And so I don't know if anything's needed from council side, city council side.
Moving forward in today's meeting, do you want to say any more on this presentation or wait for an email?
I've seen it and
Okay.
I don't need to
understand.
see
You don't need it?
anymore, it's a matter of wearing different hats, which I do on several boards.
Seeing an email clarifying it, I mean, it helped today, right? Chief, it helped hearing both sides one more time. If there's more clarification, you can send out an email that helps us actually explain it to the rural board, which is what our job is when we get, next time we have a meeting. That's helpful. I mean, you meet quite often. I hope you relay what we talk about in these meetings to the rest of council. So that's our job to talk to the rural about, but there's clarification. It sounds like there is some clarification going on. That would be helpful to me, so.
So I would ask this, sorry to,
Rod?
No, I think that's a very prudent. Yeah, that's something like.
We know you got a presentation, we'll just hold off on it if you're good, and you'll send us an email. Correct, and hopefully. And next year, moving forward, let's stay consistent in our messaging, and if we know something's coming up like discretionary, non-discretionary, let's start being consistent on the front end throughout further presentations. So they're not going back and saying, well, wait a minute, this wasn't in there. Do I make sense with that comment?
Of course.
Yeah. Again, we depend on the chief. He's our liaison. The chief needs to understand this and feel good about it. It's the only way we can understand it and feel good about it. Chief?
so Chairman Swanee, if I can ask this, I think the email should be vetted through me. So I should be able to see what you're responding to as opposed to directly reporting to the board. Because I asked the questions, so I think I would be more apt to see the email and then say, I agree with this email. Brian and I have worked through this.
I like
and
that.
Here's the interpretation.
Yeah, and that goes back to what Rod suggested last time, is you were asking them to jointly get together, the staff and finance, and put out a joint email to the board. Am I correct? Yeah. So, I mean, you guys can have your arguments behind the scenes. We understand that. You're not gonna always agree, but give us something you can agree on if at all possible.
I cannot promise that. I have to admit,
You and Rod gotta work that out.
Chair, two perspectives, right? This is the budget for the fire department. Brian's perspective is X, Chief Sendelbach's perspective is Y, because what I'm hearing and have heard for months now. Brian has prepared a presentation. Chief believes there are inaccuracies in it, and you cannot like that term, but that is his genuine perception and belief. You believe that his perceptions are wrong. And all we're doing is fighting over whose perception is correct, and we're not getting anywhere. So maybe instead of that, we look to see what are one another's perceptions and present both. You've got a very smart board here, you've got a smart council, they can read two opposing perspectives and reach a conclusion.
Yeah, well, I like that approach, Emily. I'm happy because I'm disinclined to have it go through chief. It'll be my work. And then, chief wants to respond to it, he can respond to it.
But hold on though, because I want to be protective of my board and my client. This is not a department of the city. LFRA is not a city department. The only direct report to the city is the fire, or excuse me, to this board is the fire chief. So if it's not going to go through Chief Sendelbach, it should be collaboratively developed and come.
Sure.
Right.
I love you. You should be a mediator.
I don't have the temperament for it, but let's try to get through the next 7 days together. So.
6 days.
6 days.
Well, I'll craft the, the email and then, I'll just go with Rod and with Rod. Get it to chief so we can figure it out. And then, yeah, I think something Ryan would help, but.
That's the agreement then. Action forward.
So if I understand it.
We better make.
You're gonna say that
Right away.
and Gates, you can put your comments with his numbers.
So I will address Chief's presentation, which was him addressing my presentation. And then I will just send that out PDF style, and then Chief can add his comments to it, and then we'll go from there.
Then where does it ultimately? go?
Then it goes to the LFRA board jointly from Chief and Brian.
And then we need to decide what works for us. And then what's important,
After the election.
and
right?
what's important, again, the city is 3 out of 5 people in here.
Yeah.
The decisions that we make, the city can't just blame on the authority. I didn't say you are, don't get excited here.
It's too late. If I may, sir, it's not about,
I'm gonna finish.
okay.
I mean, if we're working on this joint, we haven't had this problem in the past. We have not had this problem. The city understood decisions that were made in here. We need to make sure everybody at the city understands what the authority decided. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, no, that's never been a point of that presentation. It was never about the legitimacy of the decision. And yeah, I think our communication, I know I have made a large effort to increase communication with our board so they understand more what's going on here than in years past. I don't think they knew what was going on here in years past. I know they didn't.
I
And that's
don't
why I
know.
want to open that up more. And I think it's creating some issues.
I know we've had a great working relationship for many, many years until this last year. And this isn't pointing fingers at anybody. Something has broken in the last 18 months.
I agree.
Hadn't been an issue in the past. It's not Paul and I doing it. We're listening, we're trying to understand.
It all comes down to me.
Well, It's kind of like, the city coming in here and pushing us into a rural district and saying, what's the authority up to? You guys are trying to push a district on, me and Paul aren't doing it. There were 3 people from the city out of 5 people that said, hey, we need to have a district, and we went along with it. Same thing on budgets. So now when this authority makes a decision, these are really city representatives making these decisions.
Absolutely.
That's the only way this authority can work. Otherwise, we need to go back to what we used to be. Because from everything I'm reading in the tea leaves, we're not going to a district. We're either gonna be authority or we're gonna go back to our old ways. That's what it seems like to me, from what I'm hearing. And I'm not pulling the plug on a district, don't hear it. First of all, I can't pull it by myself, but the conversations all indicate that the city no longer wants a district. And if that's the case, we either gotta make this authority work, or we gotta go back to our old ways.
I mean, if I can say that, I think the unification process has certainly hit a lot of challenges around property tax issues for the city. So I think a lot of this happened when we hit that first bump in the road. I know I sat with chief, have lunches with him, say, hey, when we do this district process, there's gonna be bumps in the road. Right, this is not gonna go in a straight line, we need to stay together. And I think we hit that first bump on the road. A trunk flew open and everything flew out. You know, we've just been, that was the first bump where it's like, you know, we had a lot of research done by Butler Snow. They pointed out these issues and it seems like that's when it stopped. We had the council meeting. The turnover in finance here has been difficult for us to deal with because we're trying to get a consistent thing there. So I agree, it's been a difficult environment, but it kind of knew that was gonna happen.
Well, we have a new, city manager coming on board. I would really like to get his input since he has managed a large city. I don't know where he's gonna come down, so I would like to hear from his experience, what he, suggests in this realm too. We're coming up in the holiday season, and Emily, I trust you're continuing to work on stuff and move forward, so.
We had not to step on chief's toes, because I don't know if this is in his report. It certainly was in my attorney's report that went to the board, but we did have a meeting of all parties. And everybody went home with homework. The rural had some homework, the city had some homework, and I had some homework on behalf of the authority. So everybody's working on that. We won't regroup until after the election, because again, until after the election, we don't have all the information, but the expectation is once the outcome of next Tuesday is known, then the finance committee will, or the committee, that kind of fell apart, but that group will come back together with our homework completed and the results of the election known, and we will start talking about where to go there.
Further comments?
I'll just say I'm not ready to give up.
Good.
I did, I'm not doing the work. A lot of smart people are doing the work, that's good. And I'm not ready to give up.
On a district, you mean? Good to hear. Well, please share that with fellow council members. Chief, comments? Still want this job?
Depends on the election.
It's all good. It's all good. No complaints.
Okay. If there's no further comments, and we'll move on to our next item, and that is item number 4, review briefing papers and correspondence.
Nothing.
Nothing?
Come on, make something up for us, things, okay? Gotta be something nice out there.
Well, it's part of the chief report. Mr. Chairman, we do have correspondence. This is in regard to Sure. In regards to other correspondence. It'll go fast, so it's only a couple slides, so. So the first correspondence, I was just adding it to my chief's report, I apologize. So next slide. You see at the congressional record, Representative Lopez was actually one of the congressmen who came out to the Alexander Mountain Fire. He went on the floor of the State House and read this. This is giving thanks and gratitude to all the responding agencies, obviously including the LFRA. So they received that formal documentation from the congressman. Second correspondence, if you didn't hear, I know Tom Kerrigan was extremely happy, as were we, where we set a record on Kids Pack. I think this is the 3rd or 4th time that we did this, but LFRA members and their family members contributed to Kids Pack, so we're pretty proud of that. Tom Kerrigan is over the moon to say the least, so. The next one is, again, correspondence. This was in regards to Squad 46's efforts to support an elderly couple in regards to their smoke detector, so. And next slide. So I'll go through this. We just covered the top two items. So the personnel updates, this is more from the city perspective. As I contributed to this, the airport director appointment, John Kinney, can you help on the start date? I did not know the start date.
He is starting on the 12th.
So 12th of November for the new airport director. He's coming from Boulder. Then, as we talked about, city manager, Bob Cal Jr. and Jim Thompson were the two finalists. Jim Thompson starting on December 30th, coming from Scottsdale. Rural district response boundary. This is something that we'll discuss at greater length with the rural district. But this pertains to areas outside of our current service area that may have interest from an insurance perspective of joining our service area. So just so you know, I did bring this up to the board a number of months ago, and Chairman Swanee, this is a member of Rotary had approached me regarding their inability to get insurance. We basically led them down a track. She informed me yesterday that she was able to get insurance. Long story short, she was at such a high risk, and it was a vacation cabin in Estes. We kind of laid out a plan for them to include mitigation and working with their insurance company, and they were able to get insurance based on our efforts and the acknowledgement by the fire department that mitigation services had been provided, and then an update on the mitigation that had been provided. So I think we're going to see that more in our area, where we lead the insurance company and say, here is a before, here's an after, and here's the acknowledgement by the fire chief that the services have been met. So pretty good outcome in that particular case. The burn prop, I'll turn over to Chief Ward.
Chief,
Yes.
ask a question. And just an approximation, what was the cost of the Alexander fire?
$6.1 million.
That's what it cost us?
It didn't cost us.
Right, well-
The overall loss, I should say.
Okay.
So that takes in county, takes in state, takes in the loss of homes, and so it's 6.1.
And from an expense perspective, did we have a lot of overtime on that?
We did, but it's reimbursable. In fact, Chief Smith is working on that now. Yeah, we will not, it's important that you understand, their LFRA will not be at a deficit for that fire. In fact, I hate to say this, understand the context in which I'm sharing it. We will actually have, we'll make money off of that. I know that's a horrible way to word that, but I don't know how else to say it.
No, I understand.
Overtime will be fully recouped, and there will be charges for the apparatus.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
And Chief, going back to the citizen that he helped out, their insurance. That's fantastic. The only thing I'm thinking back of mine is, once the people in the neighborhood, that could be the whole canyon, figure out that guys can come out and do what you did. You know, a lot of.
No, and it's not necessarily gonna be on us. We can defer them to contractors, whatever be the case. The problem is, and you've seen this in the news, Colorado is vulnerable to losing insurance.
Yeah.
This particular person, their insurance was going up by $6,000 above and beyond what they were already paying. It was an excessive rate to begin, and it's a 2-bedroom cabin. So the point is to drive them to a plan to say, you can live in Colorado, but you got to work with your fire department. Here's how to do it. Where I'm referencing the folks that are outside our service area, they would, in order to get insurance, they will have to say that they have an agreement with the fire department, that they are part of our service area. They're not going to be able to get insurance. And then we can put all the mitigation procedures in place. Now they've got a roadmap to stay within our community.
It's all good, and I spent 43 years in the insurance industry, the last 15 in the reinsurance industry. And believe me, there's maps out there, and Colorado has a big X to it. And sometimes there's an arrow pointing up, sometimes there's an X. So I'm congratulating you in a way, because you're changing that perception. It's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
It's start at ground level. So as Jeff knows, it's not going to get any better near term. right?
Well, absolutely.
So, appreciate the efforts.
Mine has tripled in the last several years living in a rural area. Literally tripled. And I told my daughter, who now handles my insurance, and she said, don't go threatening to go elsewhere because nobody else wants you. You're lucky to get renewed. Yeah, and they're not worried about the state kicking them out. The state needs to be working with the insurance company saying, how do we make this win-win for everybody?
Yeah. And I think at the high level of the state, they're looking at a market of
Yeah.
last resort.
Yeah.
They are.
I'd love to be part of that. I can find a way to get.
They're like,
that, but
there's a national flood insurance program, there's a hurricane
basically, that's a
program.
model.
Yeah, and with climate change, I mean, they need to be doing something about fires.
Sorry to.
No.
No, great points, thank you.
Some updates, the Community Safety Division, it's really hard to see, but that's Chief Dan speaking at Embassy Suites, the American Planning Association Conference. First time we've been involved in that, but she was speaking about the wildland urban interface requirements that we do here in Loveland. And she was speaking with the Wildfire Resiliency Board, the Resiliency Office of the state, and the city of Louisville. The other piece to Community Safety Division I don't have up on the screen is our progress with Berthoud Fire on contract with them to cover their fire inspections and plan reviews for next year. We're to the point now where it's actually in legal's hands. It's Dino has the contract to work on to make that happen. I think we've got everything worked out for that. Carrie and her team is meeting with the Berthoud team with all the details and the background, the processes and stuff. The thing for us is this is a no cost thing for LFRA, and we gain some part-time inspector time out of it that will help us out on some inspections here in Loveland. So it's a good deal for both organizations. The burn prop, the final permit requirements are being worked on right now. Pre-construction meeting with our infrastructure contractor we brought on board. Construction is mobilizing resources down there this week. Chief Class and his team is flying out to Houston to the final inspection of the bird prop on November 10th to take a look at it. And then the Health and Wellness Center, we've got the bids back, and we have a special LFRA board meeting coming up on the 12th, I think it is, of November, to have the contract signed for that one, so we can get the construction going on that one. Making some progress. Some training updates. Did a lieutenant academy. We had 7, Tim? Yeah, lieutenants. Yeah, new lieutenants and acting lieutenants go through an academy. The first time that we've done an academy setup like this with the group. In the past, it's if we had a big group, we'd do an academy. If we had small groups of promoted people, they did some individual training. So we're trying to bring that in and better define what that academy is going to look like. So we did the first one last month, and everyone successfully graduated from that. Live fire training last month, and then we did some command training with Berthoud and Front Range, which is fairly normal, but this time Greeley Fire joined us in that. So that was a good addition. We have to work with them. Annual Mayday training, which is firefighter emergency training, and we do that with Front Range and Berthoud as well. FRFC Academy pictures, that's each of our recruits, 3 recruits, and they're doing well. We just got an assessment back, Andrea and I received from the cadre, and they're doing really well. So we look forward to them graduating in December. Community education and engagement, a few events that we've been out to. The biggest picture on the right, that was down at Good Sam for September 11th, the Red Bandana Day. I think it was the Kite Fair. That was the one that January has the little tent set up for, and then a birthday drive-by for was a 100-year-old veteran.
So Colorado Task Force One, we've talked to you a little bit about them in the past. This most recent deployment was somewhat extended. So Loveland's one of like 25, 26 teams, fire departments, I should say, from Colorado to make up Colorado Task Force One. West Metro is the sponsoring agency, so they're the primary leads for it, and then all the other departments help create that team. So when Hurricane Helene came in, we did send one of our individuals that was back on like September 25th or so, and they were gone for 2 weeks. And then Milton came in, so that was a type 3 team, which is like 45 people now. But when Milton came in, they were more concerned about that hurricane. So they upgraded Colorado to a type 1 team, and then they basically swapped out the team members. So then myself and 2 other of our folks went for the type 1 deployment for Milton. But between September 25th and like the 21st of October, we were gone supporting those events. Just some pictures of the activities that they were at. Helene turned out to be more damaging, more impactful, I guess, than Milton was. Milton kind of came through with fast. It was a bigger hurricane. Helene caused a lot more problems.
Do you bring apparatus to that tent?
No, they the training and the equipment here.
October 11th, we had a structure fire up north off of 57th Street. An outside fire. It was actually a arson fire and burned into the attic of the mobile home. Brought under control fairly quickly. Crews were on scene for quite a while doing overhaul. Fire investigation was in conjunction with Larimer County Sheriff's Office. That one, then they've made an arrest. This was one that's in Peakview Drive, which is in Mountain Range Shadows, just north of the airport. So it's in Cooter Fire Authority's district, and Tower 46 and the battalion chief responded up there with PFA in Windsor on a structure fire on October 13th. It was actually a garage, and it extended to the side of the house. October 22nd was a structure fire response into Weld County. It was about a mile into Weld County off of 34, and then to the south in Front Ranges District. It's a large garage shop, and it was fully involved when the crews got there. Engine 50 was actually the first arriving. Just the straight shot they have down Highway 34 with Greeley Fire showing up right behind them. So the training we did either earlier in the month that included Greeley, we got to play some of that out. We worked with Greeley in Front Range on that fire for several hours. Our battalion chief had command of that one. We're good.
Sheriff Fain's brother.
It was who?
Sheriff Fain's brother.
Oh, really, man, the flame through that you can see from behind.
Okay, that's our agenda. Is there any other business for board consideration? Anybody have anything you want to bring up?
I do have one comment. Last Saturday morning, I attended a emergency management seminar. There's a number, I think it's 401 or something like that. It's highly recommended. This was an elected officials class. If you're familiar with it, it was a half a day. It was fantastic. The sheriff was there. It's interesting enough, he never took the class, but yet he worked through the Alexander Fire, without having to take the class. So he thought maybe he had to backtrack and learn all the rules specifically, but we had good attendance and very informative. And it answers a lot of questions I have of all this ties together and how the fire responsibility kind of goes down the road and back up and resources, funding. We went through all that and the backfills, how long it takes and very informative. So if you hear about it in the future, that's what it's about. I think it's great.
Good to hear. Shawnee, if I could. Director Mallow, if you could help me, I had shared that with former city manager Steve Adams to make that standard curriculum for incoming elected officials. I think it is absolutely critical that anybody that is elected to office in our city, go through that.
Got it.
You know, to piggyback on that a little bit, more of a question. Do you feel other city councilors understand that we are reimbursed on these fires in the rural from the federal government and various programs? As I've heard it said before, that a lot of resources go to the rural on these.
Oh, I haven't heard that, but I think there's a understanding that's leveled by different people. Sometimes people say, well, they're reimbursed and forget about it, but it takes a long time. to
Yeah,
get
it's not
reimbursed.
relevant to the 2013 flood.
Yeah.
We're not waiting 11, 12 years for reimbursement.
Yeah, but the point is, it does happen, but there's a void in somebody's checkbook until we get reimbursed. So I think that could be better understood.
I think, in the context of, the contingency fund that we have with 18 something million. We do get reimbursed for COVID expenses. We do get reimbursed. It's not, when there is a disaster, there will be monies coming in from the feds and the state stuff. So for me, the contingency fund doesn't need to be as large as it is.
The one thing that was clicking for me was the money that was being spent had to come from somebody. You pay your bills as you go, right? And I learned that from, and Rod, correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, but the departments that it was coming for, Park and Rec, and all the different divisions, a lot of involved, it just kind of absorbed the cost. It didn't come out of the contingency. I kept looking and said, wait a minute, nothing's coming out of there, it's for emergencies, but they were absorbing it. And they'll get backfilled as time goes on, but I don't know what it takes to come out of the emergency fund, contingency fund, but it's much bigger than what happened with Alexander epidemic, so.
Chief, when the new counselors come on board and you're driving them around, or don't we have some type of orientation there?
Very limited.
How about, he'll take us anytime we want.
Yeah.
Well, no,
We gotta ask.
But does the city have a program for a new city councilor, mayor? I mean,
It's very limited.
I would say it'd be very educational.
Yeah.
To bring them on board and make sure they understand stuff like this.
Yeah.
Different departments will individually do orientations, and it's up to counselors whether they take the initial briefing they get is very limited. Open meeting law, it doesn't cover a lot.
But as far as the fire department goes,
Yeah,
it's out there, the invite's there. After election, the invite's there, but some counselors you just can't grab by the elbow and say, come with me. You can't make them.
Well, and as we hopefully attract younger, people to run for council, it's not limited to just retirees, and, people have jobs and trying to schedule, orientations with every department becomes more difficult.
when I was on the school board, they had like an orientation for all the new members. It's very beneficial. We all came in, sat down together, and they rotated different heads of departments come in and talk about what's important. I would think that would be beneficial, not telling the city how to do their business or anything, but sometimes in conversations with people at the city, I'm not sure they understand what the rural district is versus the fire authority, and I think education would help us all understand each other a lot better.
And I'm thinking back, been on the board, council now for 3 years, 6 days. And one thing Chief Singelback did is, I think he might have ended up with everybody, but he gave me a tour of the city and different stations and things like that, but come to realize he was doing that because he had plans. And I was one vote out of 9 closer to his plan. He was very educated.
He's very non-political. Job description.
Well, when he rode you around on the back of the bicycle,
He picked you up in the uniform with the holes in the elbow and the knees and.
So the offer's there, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
We got off track. Any other business, Rod?
No, sir. I've got 2 things, probably, and they're probably related. In the board packet, the items that are usually provided as far as breakdown of city, and I understand Cheryl is not here, but that to me is very informative, and I don't want to see that go away. I'm just one person, but the way the format was before, I don't want to see that go away. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I hope Cheryl's doing well.
She will be back on Monday. Her official day back is Friday. She'll be back on Monday, but and that will be updated, so we won't lose that as a historical.
Because that stuff's awesome. I'm glad she's doing it. That's it.
Okay, there's no further business to come before the board. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.